So moving on to the plans and photographs, as you heard from Councillor Ford at the start before he left the room, this came before the committee earlier this year, back in January. It was a 4-unit scheme, still 4 units. The application site, many of you will remember, is to the northern side of Sandycroft, western side of Church Road in Warsash. This is Church Road running over on the right hand side of the screen. The longer gardens here are the properties that front Osborne Road, which is just off the plan. The access is the same as it was in January. You'll remember coming off of Sandycroft into the site and opening out with the properties plotted sort of in each corner, if you like, as you go around. So this is the layout that's now before us, and I'll take you through the changes from January to where we are now in just a moment. There is a very, very faint line, I appreciate, and it shows on the screen behind me, running down here, and that's that back corridor we had previously in terms of protecting the hedge for back navigation and back flight. So that remains. You'll see from the main agenda the reasons for refusal from the January meeting were twofold, but specifically to do with the plots 1 and 2 and their resultant gardens, and whether there was adequate usable gardens and adequate amenity space for these 2 plots. The second reason was to do with the lack of a secured 106 agreement, and there's commentary in the report about that and how that's being dealt with this time around. So looking at the differences, hopefully this is readable. I'll take you through it as best I can. The sort of solid roof forms are the same as the previous slide, so that's the scheme that's now before you. The red outline is the applicant trying to illustrate for us the refused scheme that's overlaid over the top. So the red is the scheme that's refused in January. So looking at plot number 1 to start with, the actual house has moved forward. You can see its front elevation was here. Now it's sitting further forward in its plots. As a result, the whole house moves forward. But also you'll see there's an element here that's not included on the house here. So they've reduced the depth of the house as well as moving the house forward on its plot. As a result, you're getting nearly 16 metres in terms of garden depth at its longest, and we're at 11 metres at its sort of shortest from the rear of the house. The other difference you'll spot is carports are reducing from double carports to single carports. That's consistent throughout the development for all 4 properties. Still meeting your standards with 1 space in the carport for plot 1, for example, and 2 adjacent to it at surface level. But as a consequence of the reduction in carport size, you get a greater garden area or increased garden area for plot 2. So moving to plot 2, again there's an element taken off the back of the building here, which increases that garden's distance to just shy of 9.5 metres in this location. You have got 23 metres just over in this location, and at its longest here you've got over your 11 metre minimum. The garden wraps round to the north, and again there's an element of the building here which has been reduced in terms of its size and its bulk. And plot 2 has also been reduced from a 4-bedroom unit to a 3-bedroom unit. As a consequence, there's the provision of an additional visitor parking space, so they're keeping the sort of the quantum of parking, but rather than allocated to be against a visitor space. You may also note from the agenda the applicant, in trying to amend plot 2, has changed the treatment of this southern elevation so it better addresses the access as you come into the site. It was a rather blank elevation previously. They're getting some activity with some fenestration and a door in that elevation now, which I think improves the appearance as you come into the site. Again, carports changing from doubles to singles, slight relocation of the hedge in this location, breaking up some of the car parking. And you'll see from the report, I think the applicant has tried to show you the differences on plots 1 and 2 specifically because of the reason for refusal, but you'll notice this boundary has moved a metre this way as well. So plot 3 has moved north-eastwards by a metre, but you still get your 11 metre deep garden in this location. So how do those garden changes equate into areas? Again, it's not a requirement of your design guide, but to give you an idea about the areas we're talking about because of the slightly irregular shaped plots for buildings 1 and 2, you've got 4 gardens for 3 4-bed, 1 3-bed house, well in excess of 200 square metres each. They've even included, I think, a small 34 square metre front garden there for plot 2 on the drawing. Taking through the house types, this is plot 1, fairly similar architecture to other parts of the borough in terms of pallet materials, concrete roof tiles, facing brickwork, some render, 2-storey crop gables. The floor plan, this is one of the 4-bedroom houses. Plot 2, again, there's a strong gable theme on this one, some tile hanging, and you'll see on the bottom right hand corner, this is the elevation that faces south. That's better addressed in the site access. And previously it was more like this top right hand corner, so this is a much better attractive property as you enter the development. And this is the one that's come down to its 3-bedroom unit now. Plot 3 hasn't changed from the previous proposal other than its siting, as I mentioned previously, and its relationship to Church Road at the back. This window in the gable is a bathroom window, and these are the 2-bedroom windows. Again, this is one of the 4-bedroom units. And plot 4, again, is unchanged from the previous scheme that was before you in January. Also a 4-bedroom dwelling. So looking through the photographs, the first photograph, and the ordnance survey plan, if it's helpful, is on page 28 of your agenda, sort of sat opposite number 6 Shellcroft, looking back eastwards. So Church Road is running left to right beyond the properties here, where the cars are sat here. And this is as you come into Sandycroft. This is Shellcroft going off to the right hand side. So number 6 Sandycroft is the driveway just starting here on the left. So this is where you'll come into the site, turning around on that same spot. So this is number 6 Sandycroft, round the corner, and where the 2 cars are parked there on the turning head will be where the access to the site is formed. Coming into the site, this is 6 Sandycroft, so I'm in the site looking back southwards towards the access, which will come in fairly central in the photograph here. And you'll have plot 1 excuse me, on the immediate right, and plot 4 to your left. I'm just going to pan around, so we're turning around looking sort of eastwards, if you like, towards the Church Road property. So you'll have the garden here for plot 4, and plot 4 sitting onto the right hand side of the photograph. As we turn around towards 20 Church Road, which is this half of the pair with number 18, and you'll notice from the report in terms of separation distances I mentioned that the first floor of 20 has a blank elevation. So plot 3 sits sort of to the left hand side with its garden going off away from the photographer, and then turning round to the boundary to number 16B Church Road and 16A in the sort of middle ground. This is the location for plot 2 and the parking along this boundary here. This is that northern garden for plot 2, so I'm sort of looking northwards, if you like. This is 16B Church Road, and the polytunnel and the shed there are in the gardens of the Osborne Road properties. Turning round towards the west, this is the western boundary with those Osborne Road properties. This is also the hedgerow to be protected as a result of the back foraging corridor. And turning round towards the southwest, access coming in off the left hand side, so plot 1, and this will be plot 1's garden in the rear corner, essentially in the photograph. Nothing further, Chairman, unless there are any questions after the speakers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking as an objector to this application. I refer to your design guidance SPD about developments in backlands, and I quote, dwellings within backland locations must be carefully designed to preserve the outlook and privacy available to existing properties. Properties constructed in these locations often need to be single-storey in design to minimise impact on neighbours. This guidance has been accepted for over 25 years in this area and restricting to either single or 1.5-storey dwellings. This recommendation was commended by 2 rejected appeals, one for this site and one for the McGovern News development. My research, limited though it is, indicates that Fareham Council now appear to be one of the few local authorities abandoning this guidance to the betterment of out-of-borough speculators, to the detriment of local residents and constituents. Going on, I find this application confusing, and it only deals with the reason for failure of the last application, although Mark told me it was a standalone application. In that case, it is an incomplete application. I don't think I'm the only one who thought it was just an amendment to the previous application and assumed wrongly that their previous objections would apply. Their submission appears to have some problems with reality. There are mistakes in the area of the site on the plan and the density of the Sandycroft development. These have been consistently pointed out by me and others in their previous submissions, but they cannot be bothered to correct it. They appear to have moved the proximity issue to the rear of number 11. So the garden of number 20, Church Road, whilst this being a selective, whilst still being selective where they measure the depth of garden for the top plot. I'm concerned with the reliance of the development on the history of on the development, on the hedges particularly. You've noticed on there that it's been chopped back rather vigorously before the original application, and trees have been removed. Use of carports and the lack of storage for family houses will lead the purchasers to put garages, try to turn them into garages, and we will need to police that. I am asked, and with a breakdown of local cohesion, I ask the committee to reject the application. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Good afternoon. This application should be refused. Firstly, the reasons for the last refusal have not been addressed. Gardens 1 and 2 are still of an undesirable and inappropriate shape for their area. Plots 2 and 3 do not meet the planning standard of 11 metres garden depth, which includes the hedge forming the required wildlife corridor. This application therefore represents a cramped overdevelopment without external amenity space. Furthermore, House 1 is 1 metre closer to both 18 and 24 Church Road, which is to the detriment of the residents of those properties. That wasn't shown on the diagram which the planning officer showed us. The garden of 20 Church Road will be less than 11 metres deep, according to my reading of the plan, contrary to the planning standard. The officer's report argues that the 11 metre standard is relevant to sight lines from windows. This is a new argument which should not be allowed, as the previous refusal was made on the basis of the amenity space that flowed from the 11 metre requirement. The development statement on density is completely false. The opposite is true. The development that's being proposed is actually 20% denser than Sandycroft, not the other way around. The developer's persistent incompetence over density demonstrates his cavalier attitude to the owners of surrounding properties and casts doubt on his sincerity. Secondly, the nature and appearance of the planned dwellings is completely different to the established adjacent area of Sandycroft. It proposes 3 and 4 bedroom houses of 2 stories with steeped pitch roofs, with very little or no front garden and no open space. By contrast, Sandycroft comprises 5 bedrooms of mixed heights, with driveways, substantial front gardens including large trees and large open green spaces. Thirdly, there are further indications that the proposal will overdevelop the site. These include the front door of plot 2 and the rear door of plot 4, both let directly onto the road. Plot 2 appears to have no back door and there's no access to its back garden except through the house, unless the hedge is heavily cut back. There's no practical provision for the required cycle storage or refuse bins, and the manoeuvring space is less than the 6 metre standard, which will make some of the parking spaces unusable. I believe that the committee's concerns on overdevelopment expressed at the last meeting when this matter was considered have not been addressed. There is simply not enough room for 4 houses on this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFarlane. Mr. Gould, please.
As members will be aware, this application follows an earlier application that was refused due to concerns about the sizes of the gardens proposed. The application before you today seeks to address those concerns and comply with the Council's aims and objectives to provide new residential development that is sustainable and will provide a high quality of amenity for residents. Since the earlier application was refused, we have sought to address the concerns of members and residents. We have visited the local ward member to discuss the specific concerns relating to the previous reasons for refusal in greater detail, and we have also engaged directly with residents adjoining the site. One of the residents raised a concern about the proximity of one unit to the boundary shared with their property. As a result, we have moved that dwelling further away from that boundary. Members will recall that their specific concerns related to the gardens serving plots 1 and 2. In the previously refused proposal, the gardens serving those plots were 199 and 181 square metres respectively. The revised proposals before you today will provide gardens with minimum dimensions of 11 metres. Plots 1 and 2 have areas of 226 and 234 metres respectively. These measurements represent a 27 square metre increase at plot 1 and a 53 square metre increase at plot 2. To assist members to put those measurements into context, it is useful to compare these figures with some other residential developments recently approved in the borough. In January 2016, permission was approved at 70 Hunts Pond Road for a 3-bedroom dwelling with a rear garden measuring 154 square metres. In March 2016, 8 dwellings were approved at 100 Locks Road, with gardens ranging from 56 square metres to 130 square metres for the 3-bedroom dwellings. In June 2015, permission for 30 dwellings was granted as part of the Cold East development, including gardens measuring 83 square metres for the 3-bedroom dwellings. By comparison, the garden proposed at plot 2, which is a 3-bedroom unit, would be at least 80 square metres larger than these examples, and almost 3 times the size of the gardens provided for 3-bedroom units at Cold East. It is clear from this comparison that the proposed development significantly exceeds other similar developments approved by the Council in the last 12 months. In relation to density, the site area is 0.21 hectares, which equates to a density of 19 dwellings per hectare. This is comparable to a density of 17 dwellings per hectare for Sandycroft, as quoted by the objectors, and is generally considered to represent a low density. Density was not previously raised as a reason for refusal, and the officer's report confirms that the proposals will not materially harm the character and appearance of the area. The scheme before you represents a sustainable development that would make a positive contribution towards providing high-quality housing in the existing built-up area of the borough. I therefore urge you to accept your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you for your time.
Chairman, sorry, I was just looking back to the slides. Could you give me a
Some
question?
points were raised by objectors.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this plan might actually be a helpful one to do that. I'll go back to the comparison plan. You'll have to bear with me, and if I don't pick up on all the points, maybe you can refresh my memory as I go through. One of the things that was picked up was with regards to the relationship of plot 3 to plot 20, number 20 Church Road. You can just see him off the plan there. See if I've got it's not really a better, might be a useful starting point. So plot 20 Church Road is one half of a semi-detached pair, and as you saw in the photographs, it actually has a blank elevation here at its rear, and this element is a single-storey lean-to at the back of the property. So its first floor and its main sort of rear elevation is slightly recessed compared to this footprint. So if you like, when you go back to this particular plan, the rear wall is just to the top of the slide, and this is that single-storey module. Now, looking at the separation distances, you'll see here that the applicant has marked on their 11-metre deep garden. That's from habitable rooms, bedrooms, to the end of the garden. I think I mentioned in my presentation there is an ensuite in this gable, and that sits a metre further forward, so that is a 10-metre deep garden in that location. But you've got an 11-metre deep garden by 16 metres wide. I mentioned plot 3 has moved a metre north-east. As a result, this boundary has moved a metre north-east, and there was comments that the garden for number 20 is then below your standard at 10 metres. The 10-metre depth garden I've measured from here to the end of that single-storey extension. So you've actually got 14 metres to the rear wall of the original 2-storey house. Again, it's 16 metres wide. As a consequence of that 14-metre deep garden from the rear wall and its flank elevation being blank at first floor, you've got over 24 metres from windows to the rear wall of that house, and that's how I was trying to articulate it in the report. Maybe I didn't. But whilst this is moving close to number 20, and the shortest distance of number 20 is 10 metres with the view that you've got enough garden retained for number 20. Commentary was made about the inadequacy of the aisle width. Here you can see it's marked as just over 5 metres. That's okay in terms of vehicles coming in. You'll see the actual parking spaces in this location, they're not tandem, they're next to each other. You've got this additional width of the hedgerow, and from the back of the parking space to the edge of plot 4, you've got more than your 6 metre aisle width requirements. There's adequate space there for the turning and manoeuvring of vehicles, and similarly coming out from plot number 3. There was a commentary made about the lack of front gardens. You can see as you come into the site, plot 1 has an area of front garden sitting here, and so does plot number 4. Plot 3 has a very small garden, but it sort of is self-contained by a result of relocating this hedge from here. So plot 3 sort of sits in its self-contained nature. And there's a small garden to the side here of plot 2, albeit there is a door coming directly off the path. There's a small break from the car parking. There's a path here going to a rear access point. There's a small break there, so there is access into the rear garden of plot 2, directly from the front of the property. You'll see these little grey squares in the rear of each plot. These are proposed as bin, cycle storage, garden sheds. I think that's one of the points raised, that there was inadequate facilities. Commentary was made about the content of the submission of the application. The application is made in full, so you have all the issues to consider, as you have done previously. The nature of the submission from the applicant is that, understandably, they focused on the planning history, the very recent planning history, as a weighty and significant material consideration. But the other issues, the appropriateness of the access, the appropriateness of the gardens, the relationship of neighbours, are all still material for you to think about, but the material planning history is also very much a significant and weighty issue for you to consider when you're dealing with the application. So my advice to Mr. Jordan, as he said, was it's a new application, you've got it all to consider again, but as an authority and as a planning committee, you need to weigh the planning history and your very recent decision in the balance when you come to make your decision. Are there any other points, Chairman?
Sorry, Chairman, I think there was one, the Deputy also brought up the fact that in density, you didn't agree with the figures, he felt it was 20% denser than Sandycroft.
Chairman, I think when we went through the report or the application previously in January, I looked at Sandycroft and Shellcroft and their densities, and you've heard from the speaker on behalf of the applicant as well. I can't recall exactly the densities from my report to you in January. Again, density wasn't a reason for refusal in January. I came to the view, looking at Sandycroft and Shellcroft, I did a calculation for you previously that looked at the densities of Sandycroft and Shellcroft with the open space and without the open space. And I came to the view, as the speaker did on behalf of the applicant, that the two were very much comparable. I think I had it down at about 19%. Outside of the site, and we heard it was about 17%, I think, within the site. So it's comparable. That's from memory though, so I'd have to go back and check my report, but again, it wasn't one of your reasons for refusal density.
So just one other point that they raised, that was there are mistakes in the plans that have been pointed out to officers and are still there, not having been rectified.
One of the mistakes that was referred to by the speaker was that of density, and that I think refers perhaps to the planning submission and the statement on behalf of the applicant, and the speaker, Ms Gold, I think has dealt with that for you. The other is this plan on the screen for you is an extract, if you like, of a larger plan, a larger context plan, and on that particular plan it sets out the plot sizes and the resultant site area being 0.25 of a hectare. What you have to consider is the planning application, the planning scheme before you. You've seen the red edge, the plan is to scale. I must admit I haven't got the area to hand to double check and confirm that the speaker is right or the plan is right, but you're being recommended to grant a planning permission for the scheme as shown on the plan at that scale.
Thank Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I suppose just sort of going back from where we started, we've seen this site an awful number of times. I mean, to me personally, I think it is overdeveloped. I think when you look at Shuttlecroft and Sandycroft with ample parking, double garages, etc., don't exactly fit that scenario at all. So, okay, one could say that's a slight improvement. I think there's still some way to go. The other question I wanted to ask also was the second paragraph on page 24 about the affordable housing situation and the situation regarding 20 Church Road. I don't quite understand what that paragraph means actually.
If I can help, I'd probably take you back from page 24, a couple of further pages, to the bottom of page 21. The last two paragraphs on that page where it starts moving to the final obligation previously required, just going back to our January planning committee. And you'll remember the next item on the agenda, Chairman, if we take them together, deals with the land to the south of number 20, which is off to the right-hand side of this screen. We were looking to previously bind those two parcels of land pursuant to your policy CS18, which is affordable housing, on the basis that it's demonstrably part of a larger site, and if they come forward together, they're likely to breach your thresholds that require an affordable housing contribution. We did that previously in light of a successful challenge by Reading and West Berkshire councils to a government, it was a ministerial statement and then it became government policy through the planning practice guidance about not seeking those type of contributions on schemes of less than 10. So when we were in January, the successful Reading West Berkshire challenge meant we gave more weight to our development plan policy, hence the CS18 was in full effect. The government then challenged the West Berkshire Reading challenge, and you'll see as you go over to the page 22, the successful challenge by the government effectively reinstates that 10-unit threshold where we won't be seeking, or we shouldn't seek, affordable housing contributions. So the long and short of it is where we previously had a second reason for refusal that sought to bind those two parcels of land in case it came forward and breached your policy threshold. I'm saying we don't need that obligation anymore.
But thank you, Mr. White, on this explanation. That was a lot clearer than the paper, so thank you very much.
Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose the issue really is, given it was refused last time and went to appeal, has the applicant, or last time, 2 or 3 times now, has the applicant overcome the reasons for refusal? Now, cramped layout and density are actually related, aren't they? They're not the same, but a cramped layout would tend to be the higher density. Looking further in the report, I see on page 20, it says that the SPV does set out the large family gardens, large family dwellings, I think it must be, so it's a mistake in the paper. Large family dwellings should have more generous gardens. Now the issue is, to what extent do we mean more generous gardens? So can we have elucidation of that? And so my main question is, has the applicant overcome previous reasons for refusal? Is it no longer a cramped development?
Chairman, I think ultimately that's the judgment for you as the planning committee to make. You've heard from the speaker on behalf of the applicant in terms of the resultant increase in garden sizes from your scheme previously. We've heard that plot 1's increased by 27 square metres, plot 2 by 53 square metres. The areas are well over 200 square metres. In my view, they have overcome the reason for refusal, hence the positive recommendation, but as I said at the start, that's ultimately the judgment for you as the planning committee.
Chairman, can I just ask a clarification from Mark? On plots 3 and 4, the little squares in the corner, the farthest point away from the property, I think he said, were the bin stores. Now, that doesn't make sense to me, because I can't see anybody having their bin right in the farthest corner away from their property, and then having to drag it all across the garden or whatever it's laid out in to get to the roadway for the refuse vehicle to collect it. Is that correct or not?
Chairman, the little squares, I understand to be garden sheds, so they are, I think it's accepted generally that that's an acceptable form of bin store and cycle store. But you're quite right, they are sited, especially on plots 3 and 4 to the rear of the garden. But I understand they're garden sheds and would meet that purpose.
I have to say it doesn't make logic to me.
The counter argument to that, Councillor, if you don't bring your bin waste out to the front, you don't get it taken away. So, I'm not sure it really matters much. Anyone else?
On that particular point, Chairman, I take it there is enough room to get a refuse lorry in there to get them up to the front. And of course there is, I forget the section of the most recent Public Health Act, but section 93 seems to bring to mind that you should be able to have your refuse collection point closer to the road, close to the road. But that's one thing. The other thing I do think, overall, this was a cramped site before, and I don't think we've necessarily got a less cramped site now. And how many car parking spaces have we got by comparison with what we had before? Because it would be most unfortunate if people were parking outside in the road, Sandycroft. We've got some bad examples in some parts like Cartwright Drive, etc., where there isn't adequate car parking site also.
There were 2 points there, Chairman. The first one was bin collection, I think. Previously, when we were back in January, the highway advice has been that the turning head here has got adequate space for our refuse vehicle to manoeuvre and then come and get into the site. So that there's not room for our bin loader to turn on site, but there's room off site for them to turn and access the site. And by accessing the site that way, they can get within the required curbside distances for bin collection. Again, the appropriateness of the layout in terms of bin refuse servicing wasn't something that was in your reason for refusal. As for parking, the parking standard on site meets your standard in your SPD. It's exactly the same as it was in January. The difference is slightly, though, the makeup. You'll see plot 1 has 3 spaces. There's the 2 in sort of tandem here and the one next to it. So as a 4-bed house, it needs 3 spaces. Plot 2 was previously a 4-bed house, and it had 2 in the double carport and 1 next to it where the hedgerow was, sorry, the other side of the hedgerow. This has been reduced from a 4 to a 3-bed house, so it only needs 2 spaces now. So it's got 2 spaces next to each other in the carport and on the roadside. As a consequence, its 3rd space is marked as a visitor space, the second one being outside the front of plot 1. Plot 3 has its 3 spaces for its 4-bed, self-contained within its plot. And plot 4 has 2 in tandem and 1 just across from its back door. So again, it has 3 that meets the standard for the 4-bed house. So the parking quantum is exactly the same. The makeup is slightly different, and you get an extra visitor space as a consequence of the loss of a bedroom to plot number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think all aspects of this proposal are minimal. I think the development overall is cramped, probably not overdeveloped in that sense. The gardens themselves are absolutely minimal. The average square metres per bedroom, they're reasonable, they fit in within guidelines. The parking provision could be better, but does meet our parking standards. So overall, I think it's
I would like to see it more generous, but I do not believe if we refused it, we would be supported by an inspector of an appeal. So I will support the officer's recommendation here, although I think a better job could have been done.
Thanks, Chairman. I personally think it's a cramped development. I personally feel that 3 properties on there, what we said in the past, is what is suitable on there. I think CS17, high quality design, as a reason for refusal would suffice. The issue too is about the point about refuse vehicles getting in. Now, it's been said that highways accept that hammerhead just below that tree outside of the development is a satisfactory place for the vehicle to drive into and then reverse into the site to pick up the bins. Now, what actually happens when there are other vehicles parked in that hammerhead, to me, is that what one should always be looking for is within a development, is the vehicle should be able to move into that development and therefore be able to turn and pick up the rubbish and then drive out. Now, you're reliant, if that is acceptable, which I don't find acceptable, to actually use the hammerhead as an excuse, I think it fails on that point as well. So to me, is that it fails on CS17 and certainly the point about refuse vehicles not being able to get into there and turn within the curtilage of the site. If you went for a development of 3 properties, it could be then designed in such a way that the refuse vehicle could get in there, turn and come out, as could any other large vehicle which was delivering to any of those properties. It's not only just the refuse vehicles, you're going to have larger vehicles going in there for all sorts of reasons. And at the moment, it is being reliant upon that hammerhead, and that the hammerhead can be, have vehicles parked in it at any time.
Just a quick question for you. On the question of the reversing in of refuse or all the rest of it, did this come up last time? Is this a matter we refused it on? Is it a different access to what we originally agreed for refuse purposes?
No, Chairman. This is the easy answer. It wasn't part of your reason for refusal. The access remains the same as it was previously. Perhaps if I can just clarify that we saw in the photographs the access at the moment, a couple of cars parked there, but that will obviously become the access, so that would prevent vehicles perhaps parking and blocking the access, not just for refuse or delivery vehicles, but for potential occupiers, should it be successful this afternoon. This western arm of the hammerhead serves the front of number 7, and also there's a private drive here, and you can see that on page 28 of your agenda, that goes down to number 11 Sandycroft. So this particular western arm is an active access, with the access here and the access into the site. I think any parking in that location would constitute an obstruction.
I think I tend to go along with what Councillor Evans is saying. It's not the perfect scheme, it's certainly improvement on the last scheme. And as regards the garden sizes, I mean, they're a bit scattered, but I'm tending to go on meterage, and the meterage is more than double what most houses have in length compared to width. So I think it is, to me it's an okay scheme. Councillor?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think we're in danger of adding other little objections each time it comes before us. I don't think that's fair or reasonable. The grounds for a refusal last time were clearly the garden size, the amenity space, which resulted from what was considered to be a cramped development. What we've got to consider is, when does it cease to be cramped? The parking space is said to be just enough. The garden space is said to be just enough. But if it's just enough, then it's just enough to approve. And so far as the bin stores, if the bin store is a garden shed, that shed can be moved anywhere with permission if necessary, to make it more convenient for what the inhabitants, the owners of the property, want it to be. It doesn't have to be, shed doesn't have to be at the bottom of the garden. Sheds are portable. They're portable and the point they put up. So I think we're in danger of having non-sustainable arguments if we keep adding new pieces to the previous objections, which I think is unreasonable.
Anyone else? Right, there's an officer recommendation. Do I have a proposal and a second? Proposed by Councillor Dangle, seconded by Councillor Evans. Those in favour, please show. Four, and those against?
As the chairman's casting vote then.
Well, I'll go with what I did originally, so approval. Right, the scheme's approved.